Well, good day, my friends. It's your old pal, Jordan the Lion. How are you all doing today? I hope you said great. We are coming to you from the great state of Ohio today, and we are going to go pay our respects to who I think is one of the best and most beloved game show hosts of all time, especially if you were a kid of the 80s or 90s. You know who Ray Combs was. Ray Combs of the Family Feud. We're going to go visit his final resting place today. Daze with Jordan the Lion, and you all, it begins right now. And there's my buddy, my sidekick. We got to stop and visit Papaw, didn't we? We had a good time visiting Papaw. He doesn't want to be on camera anymore, but we always have to see Papaw if we come through. I know people are always asking for a Papaw update. He's doing great. He just feels like he's so old he doesn't want to be on camera or anything like that, but he's doing great. His health is as good as could be expected. This is Garfield Middle School. That's actually where Ray went to school. He graduated from Garfield High School. Here we are, Ray's final resting place here in Hamilton, where he grew up, Greenwood Cemetery. I have never been here before. Never visited Ray before, even though I'm from and grew up not far from here. Definitely tell it's a very well cared for cemetery, and looks really nice in the fall months, that's for sure. So coming out here to see Ray's kind of special for me because, like I mentioned, I was from this area, and I don't know, when I was a kid I just didn't, some people really feel a kinship to where they're from, and I just, as a kid, I always just felt like Ohio was kind of like, just a little boring for me, and I always just dreamed of wanting to get out, and I always just felt like there weren't really any kind of jobs that I would ever want to do. I felt like most of the jobs were kind of like farmland jobs, or where you worked for a factory or for a big company and doing the same thing every day. I just couldn't see myself wanting to do that. So I always kind of admired the people from our area that got out, like Rob Lowe and Doris Day, Andy Williams, Rosemary Clooney. They would always talk about it on interviews. Anytime they did them, it seemed like if you were from Ohio, somebody would always mention it. Ray Combs was the same way. He was from here. They would always mention it. Ray actually grew up here in Hamilton. You can see his family is buried right over here. His parents, Ray Combs Sr. and Anita Jean Combs. And it says, "May all who gaze upon this stone share a love like we have known." And then right above, looks like Ray's brother, younger brother, Thomas. They also have a picture of him on there. I think if you ever saw Ray Combs, there was no question as to why he was successful. Very likable, charismatic, boy next door type. Got his start here. He actually, you know, in high school he did some theater there and was actually the class president and was given an offer to go to a military academy, the United States Military Academy, upon him graduating, but he opted not to. Eventually doing a comedic set at the Red Dog Saloon in this area, and fell in love with comedy, fell in love with the crowd and getting the applause, and eventually would get married. He was actually married up until his death, and he and his wife, he continued doing comedy. And then they moved to Indianapolis, where he was a furniture salesman. Probably a good job for a comedian. Someone who's good with working a crowd would make a living in sales, but kind of felt like he had more. So he talked his wife into moving everything out to Los Angeles. And in the late 70s, he had written a letter to David Letterman telling him about his comedy life and everything, and David Letterman told him to keep going, so he used that also as a motivation, and eventually got a little bit of success in Hollywood. Even though I think we think of Ray more as a game show host, he was really a stand-up comedian. I mean, that's really where he shined. In front of a crowd, he could work a crowd very well. He started performing, getting good gigs at the Improv, the Laugh Factory in Los Angeles. Eventually ended up getting, you know, background parts on Facts of Life. But it's interesting because in 1986, I believe, he ended up getting a guest starring role on The Golden Girls. Now, at the same time, he was actually the warm-up comic for The Golden Girls and Amen. So I almost wonder, because I've been on enough sets for live game shows and things like that, that I know if the warm-up guy is really good, sometimes they will cast him for things. So I almost wonder, because he was doing the warm-up for Golden Girls and Amen, if they just liked him so much that they cast him in the episode because of that. So he was seen in Golden Girls, and eventually Johnny Carson put him on, and that really changed Ray's life. He went from moving from Indianapolis out to Hollywood, winning a comedy contest, and then really, you know, struggling for the next couple of years to getting an overnight success, getting a standing ovation on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Which I personally believe that's what he would have really loved. I think him being a talk show host really is where he would have shined. I know eventually they did give him a pilot to do a Ray Combs show, and it didn't get picked up, but it seemed to me like he would have been a good interviewer. He was really witty, had a lot of good little jabs. I mean, that's why I feel like he was a good host for the Family Feud, which is really the big first gig that he got. He had been in, you know, like I said, some TV, but he also got to do a small part in one of my favorite movies in 1987, which was Overboard, starring Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn. The scene where, you know, she is unidentified and Dean comes to identify her and everything, that's Ray Combs. He's the security guard.
That's not my name.
This is completely crazy. Honey, sit. Everything's gonna be okay now. Maybe you'll spark to this.
We'd be glad to give her to you, but she's right.
I'm gonna need some verification.
Oh, good. Listen, I know what you mean. I come to Daddy.
But he got an offer in 1987 from the Mark Goodson Productions Company to bring back and be the host of a new version of the Family Feud. Family Feud, undoubtedly one of the greatest game shows of all time, and it had been off the air. It felt like people were probably getting a little tired of it. But with Ray's charisma, they brought it back. And in 1988, they brought it back. He had tremendous success with it. It got syndicated, so he was doing a local show, a syndicated show. Eventually, it was so popular that, you know, he was first, when he first signed on, it was a 7-year contract. I think he was making like $1 million a year, which is pretty good. Wasn't real good with his money, apparently, but for a while there, 7-year contract, he was making good money. And the show was successful. It went from a half-an-hour episode to where they also wanted an hour-long episode. So at one point, and I remember this, like in the late 80s, early 90s, like you almost couldn't turn on a TV without Family Feud being on. He would have an afternoon half-hour show and then an evening hour show. So it was like an hour and a half a day Family Feud. If there's anything I remember about the late 80s, if you turned on the TV, you could almost always find Mama's Family or Family Feud somewhere. So Ray primarily was just doing the Family Feud. He had done commercials, he had done other things before this, but he really focused on this. And it's not so much that he loved being a game show host, because he was friends with Bobby Heenan, the wrestling manager. Ray had been a part of WrestleMania 8. Bobby Heenan said that Ray told him he kind of felt like doing the game shows was beneath him, but it was a steady check. And, you know, was he on TV every week? People knew who he was. He hosted the show and really seemed to have a good time with it. He was really witty, could get all those one-liners, the zingers in.
How about... Bob Barker doesn't have these problems. How about urine? Ready for this? We have 4 children and number 5 on the way. That's right. Yeah, thank you. I'm not Catholic, I'm just careless. And
for some reason in 1992-93, the ratings started to drop, and they just continued to drop. Eventually, some of the syndicators took it off the evening and put it on just as like filler show, kind of like they would put it on in the middle of the night and things like that. So Mark Goodson had passed away and his son had taken over, and his son thought maybe a good way of giving it new life was to relieve Ray of his duties as host and hire back Richard Dawson, the original host, which is what they did. And that only lasted one season, but it really tore Ray apart. I think, you know, I think he grew to really love the job and the security of the job. And when they told him that he wasn't going to do it any longer, he really took it pretty hard. It was said that when they did the very last taping, which they did at the very beginning of 1994, and it aired in, I believe, May of 94, Ray actually said during the taping, when one of the guests hadn't got any points, he actually said, you know, this is the first time I think since I've been doing this show that somebody didn't get any points. And it's very fitting on my last show that somebody be a bigger loser than I am, basically, is what he had said. He said, you really made me feel like a man today. And apparently when the show ended, he went to his dressing room, changed, grabbed his things, got in his car, and drove home. Didn't say anything to anyone, no goodbyes, no goodbye party. It's sad. It tells you a lot about how much it must have really, really affected him. Now, he did end up doing game shows and things later. Like I said, he got an offer to do a pilot for his own show. Unfortunately, it didn't get picked up, but he would do other game shows on the Game Show Network, but just never really had the success that he did with Family Feud. And it was really heartbreaking because Ray had invested his money, he was trying to at least. He had bought a house here in Hamilton for his family, for them to come back to. He also had bought a house in Glendale, California, which is basically Los Angeles. He had opened 2 comedy clubs here in Hamilton, so he was investing in businesses. It wasn't, you know, like the normal stories you hear of somebody just squandering it. He was investing it, but he just was in really deep debt at the end. And apparently he and his wife, as long as they've been together, like 18 years, and had several children, 6 children, they weren't doing well. And his wife had filed for divorce. They had reconciled, and then she filed again. And on June 1st of 1996, there was a call to Ray's home. The home, sadly, in Glendale was being foreclosed upon. His home in Hamilton had been foreclosed. The comedy clubs had been closed. He apparently owed over $150,000 to the government for taxes. He owed over $100,000 in credit cards. He owed close to $500,000 on his home in Glendale. So really feeling the strain of it. And there was a call to his home. The police showed up. His estranged wife also was there and said that Ray had been banging his head on the wall and had a massive wound on there. When they asked Ray, he said that he fell in his jacuzzi, but his wife said that he had been in the hospital a week before with an attempt to take his own life. And so she didn't think that it was safe for him to be alone and wanted him sent to observation. And so that's what they did. For Ray's own safety, they sent him to Glendale Adventist Hospital for a 72-hour observation stay. As it says on Ray's headstone, he passed away on June 2nd. So this was on June 1st when all this happened. It was on June 2nd, the next day at 4:10, that hospital staff came into his room and found him in the closet, hung by a bed sheet, and had, you know, taken his own life. They did send him to emergency and try to revive him, but at the age of 40 years old, the beloved host of Family Feud, Ray Combs, was gone. There's a funeral held for Ray in Glendale with all of his friends and family in attendance, and then they flew his remains back here to be buried. He had a pretty sizable debt at the end, like I mentioned. So the Laugh Factory and several comedy clubs attempted to raise money, nowhere near what was needed. So pretty much most of his belongings and everything had to be sold. And Johnny Carson, the man that really gave him his big start, sent Ray's wife $25,000 and said, I hope this helps with some of the pressure and some of the costs. Really sad. Really, truly sad. Like I said, just one of those guys that made it out of Ohio, got to have an exciting life where you saw him on TV and everything, and then younger than I, it would all be over and he would be back here. Sad. Rest in peace, Ray Combs. Well, my friends, we're gonna call it a day. I want to thank Dana Rogers, Dan Stone, Vianne Smith for becoming my newest Patreons, and a big thank you to Timothy O'Sullivan for making a contribution through PayPal. Thank you all for watching and helping to support these travel vlogs. We will see you all next time. Have a great night and goodbye.